This is a video to support students in their forthcoming exam that's coming up. So this is a revision question and it's taken from the 2009 GCSE history exam. And it's simply, are you surprised by this source? Use the source and your own knowledge to explain your answer. It's worth 7 points. So let's have a look at the source itself. And first of all, let's look at the details that actually support where it's from and when it's from. So here is a report from the Munich Nazi Party on the so-called Edelweiss Pirates, July 1941. So it's taken from the time when Hitler was in control. And it says up at the top here, these youngsters, aged between 12 and 17, hang around in the late evening with musical instruments and young females. There is a suspicion that it is these youths who have been writing slogans such as "Down with Hitler" on the walls of a pedestrian subway. So let's just break this up a little bit. The source is saying that there are children aged between 12 and 17 hanging around late at night and they're playing musical instruments and they're hanging around with young females. Does this surprise us? And it's something that should surprise us, taking into consideration our knowledge of things like the Hitler Youth and how the Nazis dominated young people at the time. Boys and girls were generally kept separate from each other. And of course, this bit here we should be very surprised at. Slogans such as "Down with Hitler" is being written by the children. So let's have a look at how to answer the question itself. We need to look at two different paragraphs. You need to write a paragraph on "Yes, I am surprised because," and of course, "No, I'm not surprised because." Let's have a look at why we would be surprised that children would write something like that or be hanging around late at night with musical instruments and hanging around with girls. We know from our own knowledge that the Gestapo was a spy network that worked for the Nazis that had a massive amount of people in the different suburbs and neighbourhoods of Germany that would spy upon people. Any type of grumbling about Hitler or any jokes or any type of graffiti would be reported to the Gestapo, and ultimately they would arrest them because they had the powers to search people's homes and to search people's belongings without permission. Don't forget that the Nazis actually controlled the police and the law courts at this time. So during the period of Nazi Germany, hundreds of thousands of people were arrested for small crimes to do with graffiti and grumbling about even things like saying that business was bad. And ultimately, we know from our own knowledge that the Nazis dominated the population of Germany through fear, through either being beaten up or being arrested. So let's go back to the source. We need to think about, are we surprised by this? Are we surprised that children were writing slogans and even hanging around late at night? And from our own knowledge, we need to write a paragraph stating, "No, I am not surprised because." And it's this, the Edelweiss Pirates here, that you need to include. Now this was a group of children that actually rebelled against the Hitler Youth. They rebelled against the organisation. They would do this very discreetly, but nevertheless they would get together and play music. They were generally aged between 14 and 17, and they were mainly boys. However, they would play music, and this was a big deal at the time against the Nazis, that they didn't want young children using their time that was non-productive in their eyes. They wanted children to either, if they were girls, to be sewing, learning to cook, learning to knit, and with boys it was about becoming strong and learning how to become a soldier and become physically fit. Now their slogan was actually "Eternal War on the Hitler Youth," and they would actually attack and beat up some of the Hitler Youth training sessions. And although this was by no means widespread across Germany, it's important to state that there were actually small opposition groups that were actually children. So going back to the question itself, are we actually surprised by this source? And overwhelmingly, yes, we are surprised because the Nazis dominated people's lives in Germany, whether that was through the Gestapo, the spy network, or whether it was propaganda or the Nazi police and the law courts. But we have to remember that groups such as the Edelweiss Pirates had a role to play in opposition.